Welcome everybody to International Women's Day at the University of Winchester. We've got lots of exciting things for you this morning, and thank you so much for joining us. So to start the day, we've got a very special guest, and I'm delighted to welcome Dr Joyce D'Silva, former Chief Executive of that wonderful organisation, Compassion in World Farming. And Joyce and I are just going to chat a little bit about what it's like to be a Chief Executive as a woman. And so perhaps I can start, Joyce, by asking you to say a bit about the organisation that you've been involved with for so long, and perhaps you could tell us how you got to become Chief Executive and what you're doing now.
Wow. Well, Compassion in World Farming was started in 1967 by a Hampshire dairy farmer, and his idea was to have an organisation that campaigned to change the law so that no farm animals were kept in factory farms, that they could all be in free-range systems or organic systems outside and having good quality of life. And that was coupled with the whole idea about having regenerative agriculture. Even if that term wasn't around in those days, that's what he meant. Agriculture which was good for the soil, good for biodiversity, and good for farmers too, who could take pride in what they're doing. And the organisation has been really successful in getting some of the worst factory farming systems banned. First of all, in the UK, and the first thing we got banned was those narrow crates in which veal calves were kept throughout their lives, unable to turn around. We got that banned here. And then we also got a similar system banned, which was the way pregnant sows were kept for 16.5 weeks throughout their pregnancies, unable to turn around on concrete and metal floors. And we got that banned thanks to very good campaigning and, you know, stroke of luck, the right member of parliament getting, you know, the ability to post a bill at a particular time. And in the end, the pressure being so great on the government that they gave in. So those two systems got banned in the UK and had a knock-on effect in the EU, to which we still belonged. They have both been banned or nearly banned in the European Union as well, which is great, and beginning to be banned in some of the states within the United States. So that's great. So hard-hitting campaigners, but we also do our research and make sure that what we say is true and well referenced. And we also are extending globally. So we now have offices in China, in the United States, a similar organization in South Africa, and offices in many European countries, and of course a very hard-working office in Brussels doing a lot of lobbying at EU level still, even though the UK is not in the EU anymore. We're not forgetting the EU. It's far too important to rule out just because the UK isn't part of it anymore. So we're a very busy, very hard-hitting organisation, but always peaceful and compassionate, because we're compassion in world farming.
So Joyce, compassion, as I think you know, is one of our core values at the university, and we say compassion for the planet and all life. And so we're absolutely delighted that Compassion in World Farming is one of our strategic partners with the university, which makes it even more of a joy to have you here today. So thank you. So turning to you for a moment now and your career, how did you become Chief Executive and what have you done subsequently?
That's a good question. Well, I did grow up on a farm in Ireland because I'm Irish. And so I did know, you know, one end of a cow from another. I'm not an urbanite. But when I grew up and graduated from Trinity College Dublin, I went to India where I taught, and then I fell in love and got married and had 3 children. And then I came back to the UK and I taught religious education in a comprehensive school in Essex, and became head of department. But as I found out more about animals, I decided I wanted to work in the animal movement, if you like. And a job came up, Compassion in World Farming, to which I belonged. And I became a campaigns officer, Compassion, in 1985. And then our founder and chief executive, Peter Roberts, developed Parkinson's disease and was told he had to give up. So I think really the trustees decided they'd rather have the devil they knew than one they didn't. So they appointed me as chief executive, which I did for about 14 years, which is quite long enough. And when I gave that up, they wanted me to stay on. I've been succeeded by a really excellent chief executive, Philip Limbury, who'd also worked with me for many years. And they asked me to have the rather strange title of ambassador. And I officially retired in 2015, but I still work for Compassion as a consultant 1.5 days a week. And I'm officially called Ambassador Emeritus, which just sounds terribly grand.
Fabulous. So you've been in leadership roles from quite an early time, because first of all as a school head of department, and then clearly as head of campaigns, and then chief executive, and subsequently as an ambassador. Have you ever found any problems with that? I mean, is this something which was straightforward for you as a woman, or I mean, were there problems, I don't know, balancing home life and work life, or problems at work that you were willing to share with us of any kind? I mean, maybe you didn't have any problems, maybe you were one of the lucky ones, but if there were anything at all, even in general, you wanted to share with us, that would be of interest to us all.
Well, if I think back to my university days, there's a very strange setup at Trinity College Dublin in those days, because there were 3 debating societies: the Historical Society, the Philosophical Society, which were men only. So the women had to have their own debating society.
Oh.
And I think it changed a few years after I left, around about 1968, when people started to woke up to these things a bit. And I do remember, I think it was my last year there, that some of the younger women did actually gate crash one of the men's debates, and there was a great hoo-ha about that. But, you know, we kind of groaned about it, but we didn't actually get it changed in my day. We kind of lived with it, which, you know, seems strange now, because it just wouldn't happen. And I suppose in my career, I've not been aware of too much hassle because of being a woman. There have been a couple of occasions when I've been in positions of authority, and a couple of men have obviously not been too happy with that, and have sort of been perhaps secretly working against me. I did find out from a mutual friend that one of these men had a known reputation for doing this to women in authority. And I suppose there are still a minority of men, hopefully very few, who have trouble with women being in positions of authority. But otherwise, not really, no. I think sometimes it's almost been helpful. What about you, Joy? Did you have problems?
Oh, that's really interesting, Joyce, to hear that. So I guess the main problem I had was when I was a young academic, age 24, and I suddenly found myself in a science department as the only woman. And not only was I the only woman in this science department, but I was the youngest by 10 years. And that was a real baptism by fire, I could tell you. It wasn't so much the overt sexism I received as the more subtle forms of it that were really pernicious and difficult to manage. Some years later, I started having children. That, in a sense, made it worse. But anyway, I survived that, and I ended up as Vice Chancellor. So, but I often say that sort of early experience, you know, was probably good training for me for everything subsequently. Was easygoing compared to that. So that was good.
Well, it is strange, the sort of different attitudes. I always remember when I was teaching, so this would have been sort of early 80s, and quite a feisty colleague of mine, a lady, she went for an interview as deputy head at another comprehensive nearby, which had a headmaster. And in the course of her interview, she said, well, one of your duties will be to make sure there are fresh flowers on the headmaster's desk every day. At that moment, she decided that was a job she did not want.
I had a similar experience, actually. I was chairing a meeting on one occasion with people that I didn't know, and I arrived late and I went into the meeting, and it was all men who didn't know me, and they started giving me their coffee orders. They thought that I'd come to make the coffee for them, and they said, "Oh, and I'll have a so-and-so and a so-and-so." I said, "Oh, I'm Joy Carter. I'm come to chair this meeting," and they went, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry." But it was just that assumption that because I was younger and a female, that was my role in life. So something else, I guess, that I look back on is that I remember one particular occasion when I was in a meeting of a society, actually, and they were looking for a new chair, and we were sitting round the table and we were looking for a chair amongst the people there. And they sort of went through all the many times, well, you know, can you do it, or can you do it, can you do it? And it was almost as though I was invisible. And then I sort of put my hand up and I said, well, I'd be keen to do it. And they all looked round and they went, really? And so, I mean, subsequently, I've gone on to chair something like 7 national committees and lots of other more regional and local ones. But it was just this perception that that a woman, and particularly in those days, a younger woman, would never want to, let alone be capable of doing it. So, I mean, I'm hoping the world has moved on an awful lot since those days. Perhaps just not far enough still, though.
Well, I think perhaps not far enough, but, and I mean, even when you see the United States, you know, there's a lot about Kamala Harris, the vice president, being a woman of color, but also the fact she's a woman. And you think, you know, strange that it's such a big thing. Why not a woman?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, there have been women presidents and prime ministers before, not always brilliant, but you know, they have had authority and done their jobs. So it's as if women can't manage this kind of thing. And look at yourself.
Yeah. I mean, there are some women presidents, of course, worldwide now who are absolutely brilliant. I mean, they're real role models for us, and I take real joy about that, and particularly some that are absolutely passionate about sustainability. Some women presidents, which is fantastic, and really doing some radical things. I guess there is still room to change for the better, and I'm sure there is in lots of different areas of society and women's leadership. But also perhaps we ought to finish, Joyce, on the note that that it's not just about gender diversity. Of course, as you said about the vice president in America, it's wonderful that she's a lady of colour, and how important it is to have true diversity that enriches every aspect of our life, and perhaps that's a good note to finish on. So thank you so much, Joyce, for being with us at the start of this day, and it's just a joy to talk to you as ever, and we wish you and Compassion all the best for the future.
Thank you very much, Joy. Lovely to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you.